Hello YouTube, Patrick with Homebred Aquatics. So you might be asking why I'm on my floor. Well, today we're going over part 6, my number one most profitable thing to breed. That being shrimp. Now, in this video, I'm going to go over 10 reasons why you should be breeding shrimp. What makes them profitable? And why, honestly, as a breeder, I think it's silly if you're not breeding them. All right. Number 1, shrimp are always in demand. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that stores want to buy them, people want to buy them. They're a highly requested commodity amongst the group because they can go in many different tanks. They can go in small tanks, they can go in big tanks. The diversity at which they can be in, tank-wise, makes them, in addition to most hobbyists out there. And the fact that you can have so many in a tank makes the demand and the need for a lot of them go up. So, really, when we look at a lot of different fish or things can't really get in this category of high demand, like almost to the point where you can't produce enough. And I can say again, I can't produce enough of them. I can't produce enough of them to bring them to a store on a regular basis. That's a good thing though, because they are my best seller in my fish room and to my local community. So yeah, they're always in demand. Number 2, people buy these in numbers. A lot of the time when people come over to buy them from me, it's not for 2 or 4. We're talking 6, 10. And when I'm selling them between $4 to $6 a piece, that was 7. Some of them are 7, but $6 a piece, that's a decent chunk of change when somebody comes over. And that's because people want to buy them to build a colony, to have a bunch. And I kind of stress the importance of that, not necessarily to make a sale, but so people can see them in their tanks, so people can grow their numbers. They don't overpopulate tanks very easily, and even in a 5-gallon, or even sometimes I sell them to people with 2.5 gallons, they can have 10, 20, 30, 50. So starting off with a group of 10 isn't a lot, even for the smallest of tanks. Number 3, I'm going to go into kind of mistakes when it comes to these guys. So my first mistake being quality. Quality, I think, is very important when it comes down to these. Now, don't get me wrong, I sell a crap load of coals. And I sell them for $1 a piece, and they fly out the door. And that is awesome. But I don't want what I produce just to be coals. Remember, the better the quality you start off with, the better the quality you get. So get the reddest of the reds. Get the most orange of the orange. Get the most blue of the blue. Start with that high quality. Not only do you want to outbeat the fish stores, you want to say that you have better shrimp than the fish stores do. And you can still charge below what they're charging. But you also want to bring the fish stores, if you're selling to them, the highest quality. There is a lot of competition once you start selling shrimp in your area. People breed the shrimp, you sell them, and then they're going to try to do the same thing. So you got to be kind of a one-upper in that case. You always have to have the best quality. You have to cull when necessary. So don't forget that. Number 4, kind of caveating to quality, meaning don't mix your shrimp, okay? If you're breeding for a purpose, if you're breeding for profit, don't mix the oranges with the reds because you like both the colors. It goes back to the whole quality thing. I'm not going to nail it in, but my point here is breeding for profit, make sure you're not mixing, okay? I have right here blues, reds, oranges. If we keep going down, yellows, whites, greens, blacks. I have all the colors completely separated from each other, and I regularly cull them. Number 5. I don't think anyone's ever said this, but I've been selling shrimp for years now. They're one of the first things I started actually selling, and they're really the thing that got my whole fish room taking off. And what I've learned in my local community and online, and I've seen people make polls of it, there's 2 very, very popular colors. So if I had to suggest you pick up any colors, that's blue and that's red. Those colors fly off the shelves. I don't know how many times I've actually depleted my colonies of blues from selling, and then I gotta go find somebody else that's selling them and somebody else so I can have mixed genes. Anyway, I've had to buy colonies over again before on multiple occasions because I just accidentally sold them all. And that being said, some of my other tanks, I make sure I have those colors in them as well so I can produce as much as possible. So remember it. Blues, reds. Number 6. What makes these guys another really profitable thing is low maintenance. Now, I just cleaned these tanks yesterday, but sometimes they get a little neglected. I think it's been 2 months since I actually changed the water and I didn't top it off. And I took out a bunch of plants in here because they were just getting overgrown. But my point is, in the past too, I've had these tanks where they're sitting for 3 months without water changes with no issues. Generally, you want to do about 10% water changes every other week or every week. But I've had really good success with just kind of letting these guys go and then doing these really large water changes on them. I'll get into it on my breeding video, but my point here is set it, forget it kind of stuff. There's not many tanks where we can have hundreds of things in a 10-gallon and not do weekly or every other week maintenance on it. So you can set this sucker in the corner and forget about it and let them breed like crazy. But that caveats me into my number 7, being they're low cost. Now, I used to feed my shrimp every day. Don't do that. We'll talk about it in the breeding video. Anyway, nowadays I'm feeding every 3, every 4 days, a couple pellets, and I still have booming colonies. So the overhead for food costs is super duper low, let alone you can feed these guys anything. Zucchini, squash, vegetables, you name it, pellets, fish flakes, brine shrimp, the list goes on and on and on. But the fact being, I don't have to feed them that often, lowering the cost overall, increasing my margins for what I'm selling them for. Alright, number 9. Another thing I've mentioned and I mentioned before, but I want to make it clear. Multi-tank diversity. These guys can go in with a lot of things. Now, I highly recommend that you just do shrimp tanks, but don't limit yourself. I have several pleco tanks that I have these guys breeding in phenomenally. And in the past, I've had them with guppies, and the guppies do predate, but I get one or the other here. My guppies go crazy because they have infinite food, or my shrimp absolutely go crazy with them too. So don't limit yourself. Again, I've talked about multi-tank diversity before and profiting off of tanks with multiple things in them. Don't let that be your limiting factor. For instance, I'm just not producing shrimp in here. I'm growing tons of Java moss, Christmas moss, flame moss, all the mosses, which sell also for pretty good profit. And I have to pull it out every once in a while. I mean, I literally have 2 gallons of it behind me. So remember, multi-tank diversity. Number 9, shipping. Now, this is the first time I mentioned shipping. But when I'm talking about profitability, I guess I mentioned it in my plant video last. But these guys are easy to ship. You can do standard postage on these, 3 to 5 days in the mail, and they'll do absolutely fine. They don't need the oxygen that fish do. They can tolerate the change in temperatures gradually. So putting them in a styrofoam box or a styrofoam padded box in little bags really lowers shipping costs, and the liability that's associated with shipping fish isn't there with shrimp. Again, kind of broadening your spectrum. If you're in a remote town and you're like, there's no one around me, there's not really any fish stores around me, you can breed the crud out of these guys and ship them for cheap and easy and have something really profitable in your fish room to add on to your profits and what goes in your wallet. So I just really want to point that out, that shipping these guys is something that you may not think of as profitable, but in the spectrum of what we have challenges with shipping here, these guys are pretty easy. My last thing, number 10, selling. I mentioned a lot, mistakes of selling, things you should and shouldn't do, and I'm going to elaborate on that. So selling your shrimp, I talked about it in quality. Stores want quality. They want the best of the best. They also want the cheap of the cheap. So there's a lot of, like I said, competition when you start to get into selling shrimp to stores or selling shrimp to people. You need to have better quality. And you also need to have competitive pricing. Now, over the years, I have increased my price on shrimp, but I've also increased my quality. So nowadays, I do a juvenile price and I do an adult price. For most of my colors, it's 4 for juveniles and 6 for adults. Now, that might not be what works for you in your area, but I did start off with, blues being $2 or $3, and that was for adults or juveniles. But I grew a name for myself and grew my colonies and grew my collection of shrimp I offered. So it's a little bit of a different selling market when you're looking into shrimp. You might have to start low with lower margins, and you can work your way up. Once people know who you are, know they can trust your quality, know that they're healthy shrimp and that they're going to breed for them. And then selling to the stores, you need to be realistic too. They get these things for cheap. The best I've ever been to sell to stores on standard neocaridinias is $2 to $2.50 on shrimp. But again, when stores are buying these, they're buying them in great numbers. I think the last time I dropped off a shipment of shrimp, it was like 300 shrimp. At $2 a piece, that was $600 in my pocket, cash. For what, 3-4 months of breeding maybe? So realize how you're selling. I really want to point out that maybe start low and then work your way up. Build that trust in the community. Build being that go-to person for shrimp. You'll see it on big shrimp names. MyPetShrimp.com, Shrimpy Business. I guarantee those guys started off selling their stuff kind of low, but now have become big names in the shrimp industry with great quality. Those are who I go to. Those are who I know is going to give me the best shrimp for what I'm starting with. And I'll put those in the description below, those two people. You can also buy from me. But my point being is be realistic about selling. You're not going to get anywhere close to the price of what the store sells them for. If the store sells them for $6, $8, $10, quarter it, third it at best. But my thing is, I wouldn't sell my shrimp for less than $2 a piece, unless they're Coles. And I don't expect you to do that either. But yeah, get on these guys, alright? Alright guys, I really hope you enjoyed my Breeding for Profit series. I liked making it. This isn't the last one I'm going to make. I'll definitely make another one. I really appreciate you watching. If you haven't watched all of them, go back and watch some of my other ones. They're really informative. And if you want to start making money having fish and shrimp and plants and how to sell them and what to do, watch the videos, guys. All right. And thank you so much. Please leave a like below. Please comment. I love hearing your feedback. I love hearing your questions. I love answering them. And I don't do this a lot, but hit the subscribe and get ready for my videos on how to breed all of these things. I'm gonna go over each one individually in great detail. All right, guys, thank you so much. Bye.